the Petra Destinee program. And today, this evening, we'll be discussing a bill that is pro-abortion. It's called Senate 1207, an act to remove obstacles and expand abortion access. And if you hear that, I'm going to read that one more time. It says an act to remove obstacles and expand abortion access. And that is a terrifying thought. And this bill does a number of tragic things. It takes parental rights away. It eliminates judicial bypass requirements. The abortions do not have to be done by a doctor. A baby can be aborted a full term for any reason. It eliminates a 24-hour waiting period and removes requirement that abortion after 24 weeks take place in a hospital. Now, my special guest tonight is Chanel Prunier from Renu Mass Coalition. She has been and will continue to be a warrior for the unborn. She is a voice for the voiceless, our precious little brothers and sisters who are being slaughtered daily by people who have lost their moral compass, people who make laws that endanger the lives of innocent children. Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. She believes in life and the respect for life, no matter how small, from the embryo to delivery of a beautiful baby boy or girl. God states in Deuteronomy 13:19, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life that both you and your seed may live. It is so clear what God says. Yet many people are choosing death for their seed. They are stopping their family line from continuing on. So, Chanel, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So, again, my name is Chanel Prunier. I'm from the Renu Massachusetts Coalition, and we are a constitutional, conservative, pro-life, pro-family organization. And our number one priority this legislative session is to defeat this Roe Access Act that you just described. We've sort of dubbed it the infanticide bill because it really, what it would do, one of the preeminent reasons that they are trying to pass it is to legalize literally infanticide. As you said, there's a section of the law currently that under this legislation would be struck out entirely that guarantees, a baby, if it's born alive, will be given emergency care, that if there's a botched abortion and the child is living, that it will be cared for. And we've seen that this is not just something that's focused on Massachusetts. While this is a local bill that we're talking about today, this is really part of a national effort by pro-abortion forces to alter laws around abortion all across the country. The abortion industry is a big business, and they've been under attack at the federal level. Increasingly states and our federal government are defunding them and saying, we're not going to subsidize you anymore. And so they need to have that constant stream of revenue, and so they're trying to tinker with state laws in order to keep having the money coming in. Specifically, you probably heard about, they passed a really aggressive abortion up to birth bill in New York, and Governor Cuomo, lit up the buildings in pink and in celebration. And then they tried to do something very similar in Virginia, and their governor was quoted on tape. And I'm going to take a second to read to you specifically what he said. If a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. Well, what are they discussing? They're discussing whether or not they're going to care for that baby that's now living and breathing. It's on the table and its heart's beating, and it's a baby. And they're discussing whether or not they're going to, whether it's going to live, and whether the mom's going to take it home, what they're going to do with it. And so, I think a lot of people were very understandably outraged when they heard this. Of course. And it stopped the legislation in Virginia. But so they've been focusing on other places. Right. And one of the places they're focusing here is here in Massachusetts. And so, I'm talking to as many people as I can. There's a lot of organizations that are participating in this effort to expose what's going on and to fight this piece of legislation.
Well, thank you, Chanel. I'm going to just read parts of the Roe Act, the Roe bill. Again, I said it's an act to remove obstacles and expand abortion access. So what's happened is Section 12L, the Commonwealth shall not interfere with a person's personal decision and ability to prevent, commence, terminate, or continue their own pregnancy consistent with this chapter. The Commonwealth shall not restrict the use of medically appropriate methods of abortion or the manner in which medically appropriate abortion is provided. So they're saying that they want the Commonwealth to stay out.
Right. Well,
hands off.
And it's interesting because Planned Parenthood was recently caught in some scandals in that they were, they were harvesting and selling baby body parts. And part of this provision has to do with all of that. In that, okay, so right now under the law, they're supposed an abortionist is supposed to conduct an abortion in a way that is safest for the woman, and so that the mom, if she has an abortion, there's less chance she's going to have a complication. What this does is it no longer requires that it's in the safest manner for the woman. Now, if the abortionist wants to make it easier to harvest a heart or harvest baby lungs and sell them, they no longer have to take the safest method. They can take the most profitable method. Because the state can no longer interfere in the method or the kind of, or the situation with which that they're conducting an abortion. And so they're trying to insulate themselves from problems that have occurred in places where, they were, rightfully caught engaging in behavior that, they should be following procedures that guarantee the woman is safe.
Yes.
It's the same thing with the provision that in here, they generally, late-term abortions after 24 weeks take place in a hospital. So if there's any problem, they're considered much more medically risky than if you have an abortion at 9 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever. And so they're in a hospital. This would take them out of a hospital. They could be done in inexpensive clinics. And so that saves money for the abortion industry, but there's less ability for a woman to be rushed to the emergency room if she has a perforated uterus. She's in a clinic that may or may not have any kind of life-saving equipment. All of the provisions that require things like wide hallways to get a hospital gurney or anything like that gets this law, this piece of legislation, rather, it's not law now, gets rid of all that stuff because it's inconvenient and it's costly for the abortion industry.
And so, to me, I feel that is really, really a very bad move in terms of not being able to be safe.
Right.
If you so choose to have an abortion,
right.
You're not safe, and they really don't care whether you are or not. It's just, it's to me.
It's a business to them. It's a business.
It is. It is because I read a piece, and it said that they wanted to make sure that their bill got through because they said it was more or less that we got to show them. Like we're the top, Massachusetts the top, and we've got to do this for Massachusetts, and people got to look to us. And in nowhere did it say, and I'm going to read it a little later on, nowhere did it say that it is for the health of the woman and that the woman's choice or whatever. They didn't ever talk about that. So it's kind of like, okay, what is your real motive? And so it is profit.
Yes.
Big time.
It used to be, back in the day, they talked about people that were, even people that were pro-abortion, they wanted abortion to be safe and legal and rare, right? That was the sort of phrase that you heard all the time, safe for the woman, legal, and, not happening all the time. But now, it really is a profit motive. What this legislation is aimed at doing is removing any kind of restriction, because restrictions are looked at impediments to profits, and they are, willing to get rid of safety measures, get rid of, very sort of reasonable standards for abortions in order to pursue more money. And it comes with additional taxpayer dollars, which is, another thing that this bill does is, as states across the country are restricting how much, the state will pay, the states pay toward abortions, and the federal government is reining in dollars given to clinics and whatnot that conduct abortions or refer for abortions. This legislation is aiming to take Massachusetts in the opposite direction. Right now, under Massachusetts law, Medicaid and Mass Health already pay for abortions. So if a woman is in tough financial circumstances and has an abortion, it will be paid for by state government.
Okay.
With this, they're expanding that even further. They are looking to redirect dollars that are currently spent on maternal health and healthy outcomes for children, literally kids that, poor kids that need, health care and stuff to make sure that they grow up good. This is literally redirecting some of that money to help middle-class women pay for their abortions. Because again, it's not about helping people, it's about profit. And continuing to fill in the dollars that the abortion industry is losing from other places.
Bottom line. And Chanel, I look at this and I look at all that we saw in the last couple of years where David did the undercover things and stuff like that, and then people so callously talking about, oh my goodness, I get a new Lamborghini, I want this, I want that. So there is a lot of money to be made from hearts, from lungs, from feet, fingers, whatever they can do. And the thing about it is how they do it is so inhumane. The way that they abort kids is they're tearing them from limb to limb. I mean, they tear them up into little pieces like jigsaw puzzles, and each part is pulled away until, then they have to put them back together again at the very end to make sure that everything is there. But it's really, really sad that you would want to profit from taking a human life. That's life. And to me, as I said, God said, choose life. And that you and your descendants may live. And so people don't even understand the ramifications of them getting abortions, because that is taking away another seed, another child, another part of your family.
Yeah, and they're exploiting women. Women that have a really tough situation. They may not feel like they can have a baby. They may not know what's out there for their options. I mean, I would encourage everybody to support crisis pregnancy centers. They're a great option if somebody has an unplanned pregnancy. They help with everything from prenatal care to buying diapers and everything, so that if a woman wants to keep that baby, she has that as an option. Whereas, you have laws like this, which just push women toward abortion. There are some versions of, I don't believe it's in the Massachusetts bill, but there are some of these bills out there that require listing of abortion clinics on state websites. Well, they don't require that they don't require the listing of crisis pregnancy centers on any of the state websites.
That is so sad.
There's not, sort of a fair access thing. It really is designed to push people toward abortion. And, women deserve better. They should be, given the option to, keep the baby and to choose life and to be supported in that decision, by society. So we're very focused on fighting this. I would be remiss if I didn't tell everybody in your audience. We do have an online petition that we are urging everybody to sign.
All right.
It is available at the website www.saynotoroe.com. That's ROE. So www.saynotoroe.com. And what we're going to do is we're getting thousands of people all across the state to sign that petition. And this piece of legislation is going to come up for a hearing. One version of it went to the Committee on Public Health, and the Senate version went to the Senate Judiciary Committee. So, when one of them has a hearing, We're going to bring those petition signatures to the state house, and when our folks testify against the bill, those signatures will be delivered to the legislators, both to the individual legislators who they're constituents of, but also to the committee, so that the committee can see that there is broad-based support all across the state in opposition to this. So I'd urge everybody to sign that online. It's a simple thing you can do, click and sign the petition. If anybody wants to get more involved, we're looking for people to tell their personal stories at the hearing. We're looking for people to call and email their legislators. We've had good traction, getting people to call and educate their legislators, because a lot of these people, they get sold a bill of goods. The Planned Parenthood crowd walks around and says, well, don't you support access to abortion? And they go, oh, okay, well, yeah, I better sign on to this thing. And they don't know what's in it. They have no idea that it gets rid of parental consent. They have no idea that it supports infanticide. They have no idea that it legalizes late-term abortion without any questions asked right up till birth. And so, there's been one fellow that withdrew his name. And so we're hoping that the more people call, the more the legislators will say, gee, I better read what's actually in this, and more folks will take their name off it. In terms of an in-depth analysis on the bill, the Massachusetts Citizens for Life, which is one of the organizations, along with the Renu Act coalition, that's involved in fighting the bill, has a great legal analysis at massprolife.org. If people really want to dig into all of the policy details of what they are pushing. And then we need help with things like distributing flyers and rallying at the State House with signs and whatnot. So I'd encourage anybody that has a heart for this issue to get involved in all of those efforts. So.
And I encourage you all as well, because it's a very worthy effort, and we need to save our little baby brothers and sisters. Okay. There was you did say that there is how do I put it? There is an option where you can also, instead of aborting a child, you can have the child and someone could help you. And I know you gave a name of the
So they're called
center?
crisis pregnancy centers, and I think the big one in the Boston area is Know Your Options, and there's a Women's Concern. There's Friends of the Unborn.
Yes.
There's a bunch of them all over the state, and
they do
excellent
job.
work. We have an advocacy day for them on Beacon Hill every once in a while to have individuals who have been helped by those centers come and talk to their state legislators and talk about how they were able to get the care that they needed so that they didn't have to abort. And sometimes some folks need a lot. Sometimes they need help getting out of a bad situation. Sometimes they, just need a little bit of encouragement for someone to say, we'll be with you when you have a support network.
Absolutely.
And so it runs the gamut in terms of what people need. But
but they do
but they're
have,
there.
there are options, and we want you to know that if you know anyone in a crisis situation where they're having a baby, but they may not want to keep the child, then you also have an option of adoption.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So there's so many different ways that we can handle this situation without taking a life of a child.
Exactly.
Okay? Because a child's life is so important. And the Creator God who created them sent them here on a mission for a purpose.
Right.
And so we have to recognize that every one of us has a purpose, and if we recognize our purpose, then we'll be able to help others as well.
Well, and there are people out there that can't have kids and they want to adopt, and they, this is a great way to sort of choose life for the baby and help out a couple that can't have kids. So
absolutely. Now there's another section 12M that I'm going to read. It says a physician acting within their lawful scope of practice may perform an abortion when, according to the physician's best medical judgment, the patient is within 24 weeks from the commencement of pregnancy. And that's defined in Section 12K. It says, a physician acting within their lawful scope of practice may perform an abortion when, according to the physician's best medical judgment, based on the facts of the patient's case, the patient is beyond 24 weeks from the commencement of pregnancy, and the abortion is necessary to protect the patient's life or physical or mental health, or in cases of lethal fetal abnormalities, or where the fetus is incompatible with sustained life outside the uterus, medical judgment may be exercised in the light of all factors: physical, emotional, psychological, familial, and the person's age relevant to the well-being of the patient. That's a lot of mumbo jumbo.
Clauses. It's a lot of clauses.
A lot of mumbo jumbo.
But what it means is basically, you could say, well, I'm too old.
Yeah.
Or, well, I'm too young.
Any excuse will
Or
do.
familial, maybe, I've already got a kid. I can't have two. And really what it does is it widens the ability for the doctor to say, okay, sounds good, stamp of approval. Essentially what that is designed to do, and there's two things there that I think are important, because number one, that whole litany of things that you read, medical judgment can be anything. Essentially, you can find that's a loophole so big you can drive a truck through it.
Absolutely.
And so, essentially what that does is it allows the doctor to kind of give a no questions asked,
Yes.
here you go, sort of situation. But the other thing that's interesting about that clause that you just read has to do with the fetal abnormalities incompatible with life. One of the things that the opposition is talking about is a situation where there's a particular really bad birth defect that has caused some women to carry a baby to term that was absolutely not going to live according to certain diagnoses, which may or may not necessarily be the case, because if all these babies get aborted because the diagnosis is incompatible with life, well, how do you know if they're going to live or not if they're all aborted? So that's a question. But really, somebody just was talking about this with me earlier today, called it a red herring. Essentially, they stuck that language in there with regard to late-term abortions, for babies incompatible with life, so that they could point to that in the legislation again and again, and kind of gloss over that part afterward. And so they keep pointing to that, and what I would keep pointing to is, okay, so you're talking about a very narrow situation where there are not too many diagnoses and not too many babies that are born with this syndrome here, and you're using it as an excuse or a reason to add all this other language that basically throws the door wide open for thousands of babies that don't have that particular this can't be the reason for all of these abortions over here, and they point to that section of the bill. Which is, I think, very frustrating for a lot of people, because they're focusing on this over here when really they've also done this thing over here.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right, because I believe that people will say, oh, yeah, well, that can happen. But most of the times, and I've read cases where, people have been told by their doctors to get rid of the baby because they don't think that it's going to live, but then it's lived.
Right, that's a whole additional set of circumstances. They were saying that and a friend of mine before the show actually handed me a piece of paper about a study that was recently done, that the survival rate for infants born prematurely at 22 weeks has increased 58% over the last decade, and it's some pretty amazing statistics. That prenatal care is getting to the point where a lot of these diagnoses, a lot of these things that babies were diagnosed with in the womb, doctors are discovering cures for now.
Absolutely.
In North America, it says here, 1 in every 2 pregnancies with spina bifida diagnosis are terminated. Well, now they are discovering that they can perform surgery to repair things before birth, and but you have these life-saving treatments that are available, but people just don't know, so they get the diagnosis and they abort the baby. And so it's...
And no one tells them.
And no one tells them because,
profit.
Right. So, and increasingly, I think the word is getting out there, but it's a long road to hoe.
It is, and you're doing an excellent job educating, because it is about educating people, letting them know exactly what's going on and what they can do to help out, and I think that you've been up there pushing hard, very, very hard, and I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
The other one is 12N. So I'm going to go to
Okay.
12N, right? It says, prior to performing an abortion, a physician shall obtain the pregnant patient's written informed consent on a form prescribed by the Commissioner of Public Health. A pregnant person seeking an abortion shall sign the consent form before the abortion is performed, except in an emergency requiring immediate action. The consent form and any other form shall be confidential and may not be released to any person other than the pregnant person to whom such documents relate or the operating physician, except by the pregnant patient's written consent, provided, however, that this requirement shall not impose any waiting period between the signing of the consent form and the performance of the abortion. Can you enlighten us,
Yeah.
my dear?
So there are, right now under Massachusetts law, if a young girl wants to get an abortion, there's a process of parental consent. Or a situation, if a young girl for whatever reason cannot go to her parents, she can get consent from a judge, and it's called judicial bypass. What this law would do is completely strike out and get rid of the whole parental consent notification framework,
Right.
and instead replaces it with nothing, essentially.
Absolutely.
So you have no parental consent anymore, you know, judicial bypass. And, frankly, the example that I'll give is, you have a 12-year-old girl and she goes in to get an abortion. Theoretically, some adult in her life, whether it's a parent or if her parents are not available, or a judge, should have some idea how or why this 12-year-old girl has gotten pregnant.
Yes.
She may be a victim of abuse or trafficking. If this law were to pass, the only adult that would need to be involved in this girl's abortion would be the abortion doctor, who has
That makes no
a
sense.
financial incentive to just give her an abortion and send her back into whatever situation it is. And if this happens again, well, it's tragic for her, but now she's a repeat customer.
Yeah.
She can get another abortion. He can make more money. I mean, he has no incentive to help her. And so really, you want to, the reason for judicial bypass and parental consent is to involve somebody else
That's right.
in this process, so that somebody can
Some
help,
balance.
so that there is somebody that can help people that are in trouble.
Absolutely.
And in some cases, you may have a situation where a young girl is very scared and she goes and talks to her parents and they say, honey, it's okay, we'll all do this together, and she doesn't get an abortion. In some cases, she may not tell her parents, she may go to a judge, and yes, it will, potentially be a bit of a delay. But the advocates of this legislation say that that's an impediment to access, or that's that the objective of parental consent laws is to shame and inconvenience women. It's not to shame and
No.
inconvenience a young girl. It's to find out if something is going on in her life that she needs help. And that can come from a parent, it can come from a judge looking into a situation.
Absolutely.
There are examples of women who have been trafficked, for sex, that when they went to get an abortion, that was how they got out of that situation.
Right,
And so,
right.
this parental consent law, while it may be, tough on a young lady, is designed to help,
yeah.
in bad situations. And so,
Right.
I think this is one of the reasons why even Governor Charlie Baker, who is not pro-life, has said that he doesn't support getting rid of parental notification. He's not in favor of late-term abortion. At this point, he said he's not inclined to sign this if it passes.
Right.
That may not mean that they don't tinker with it here and there and they
Right,
still
right.
pass a very bad bill that then he signs. But I think it highlights just how incredibly extreme the piece of legislation is.
Again, it says an act, I'm just reading this again, an act to remove obstacles and expand abortion access. And it says exactly what it wants to do. Again, it's taken away the rights of our parents.
Yeah, parents
This
and
is
babies.
sad. It really, really is sad. I am so sad and sad, 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 because it seems like my time is going away. It seems like we're almost done. Okay. Wow. Boom. Okay, let's see. Let me do one thing here.
So
I did have some questions for you.
Well, one more thing that I
of-
would love to jump in and talk about very briefly is to encourage everybody in your audience to see the movie Unplanned, if they haven't yet done so.
Okay.
It's a great movie. It walks through some of these issues, and it's about a young lady that works at Planned Parenthood and sees this profit motive involved and sees an abortion take place and decides to leave the industry and what she goes through. And so it's showing in theaters, and I encourage everybody to see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds good. I did have a few things that I wanted to say. Again, as I said, we have a few minutes left here, not much. I did want to, and we did hit on judicial bypass.
Yep.
So my question was, do you think another voice, and this is for everybody out in the audience to think about this, do you think that another voice with a different opinion than that of those who agree with abortion should be heard by a teenager or a preteen before taking the life of their child is important to the decision-making process? So this is a question that we have to think about. We can't just go and do things willy-nilly. And one person is not the person to just say, I want abortion, and so therefore everybody who comes into my office is going to have an abortion. We need to have a parent. We need to have a judge. We need to have somebody there who's able to put another reasoning, so that person can look.
And I think this is an excellent point in terms of, younger people, we're learning more and more and more as science develops about how their brains are not fully developed, and their decision making is not the same in your teenage years as when you're an adult. This has been one of the big motivating factors for some of the criminal justice reform that we've seen recently, where increasingly they're saying, hey, when teenagers do bad things, we shouldn't just be treating them as adults. We have to, we have to deal with the fact that younger brains are not the same as adult brains.
Absolutely.
And, that's been a part of what's been going on with criminal justice reform, but it's also, I think, very applicable here, where if you have a situation where somebody's not, their decision making is not fully their own. I mean, it makes so much sense to have another person involved in that decision.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ask my next question to my audience as well, because I want them to really think about these things here. Why are the parental rights being trampled upon by our lawmakers, and what can we do to keep lawmakers from running amok? And you spoke about some of those things that we could do, and we need to really think about these things. And I'm just throwing out some questions right now. And why not keep the judge for the intermediary? Since a child does not want to disclose information of their pregnancy to their parents, we need to have some adult who can challenge us. And I just said that in another way because I want to make sure that you understand that we have to have other people involved, not just those who are for abortions.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And then, now how old are they proposing a child can be to have an abortion without the consent of a parent?
There is no sort of, it's just wiped out of the law. So it's...
So if you can be 10, if you can be pregnant...
if you're biologically pregnant, that's that. Biologically able to get pregnant, it's not like go under this age, it's whatever it is.
So there's no restrictions.
Right.
So any age will do. And so therefore they so they prey on that, because if I'm 10 or 11 years old and I heard people that pregnant at 11 and so forth, if you're 11 years old, you're scared, you're afraid, you want to just like, oh, I don't want to tell my mother, or someone did this to me, and so you're just more likely to just go run and tell a teacher says, oh, go get an abortion, whatever the case may be. So it is so easy, and that child doesn't know or understand what's happening
at all, no.
to their bodies, as well as what's happening in the long term to them, okay? And so someone needs to be there to counsel them, not just to say, have an abortion.
That's another great point. You know, increasingly we're seeing more and more about what abortion does to women in terms of their psychological health later on. There are, you know, all kinds of support groups and ministries that, you know, help women who have had an abortion recover from that, because it is traumatizing in many cases. And I think if this were to pass, you would see a lot more women who are traumatized because they would receive abortions at younger ages and with less information than they currently do. And so later on, when they sort of start to grapple with that in life, you know, many of them, I'm sure, will feel that society didn't do what it needed to protect them because of these laws, and they were exploited for profit without any intervening circumstances that they could have had prior to the law.
Okay, and so, and then another question I have: is it true that a person does not have to be a physician to do an abortion to abort a baby?
Yeah, so under the current law, abortions are done by doctors.
Yeah.
If this passes, it becomes a bit of a gray area because it adds all this language about any kind of abortion. Well, does that mean a webcam abortion is okay? So if, you know, theoretically, you got a doctor on the other end, but he's in another state, you know, and if it's any kind of abortion is okay, can you do it through, you know, new technology that you don't necessarily need a doctor there? You know, there's talk of allowing different kinds of medical professionals like nurse practitioners, you know, and this is real surgery. You know, so it's all kind of a gray area.
A lot of doctors have had problems themselves where they have people have died.
Yes.
Have an abortion. So if you're going to say you don't have to be a doctor, but you can be any other type,
or some kind of, you know, to have it on video or whatever.
Then
you know,
I don't think that's
not safe.
It's not. It really isn't. Wow, that is something else. And so you did answer my question, because my next question was, who else would be able to perform an abortion on women and teens? So you did answer that by saying a nurse practitioner.
They're pushing for.
You can do a webcam, whatever the case may be. Wow, that is so sad. And what are some of the dangers associated with not using a doctor for an abortion procedure? What are some of the...
Well, if there's any kind of complication, that person may or may not be trained for the complications. And so, you know, that movie I referenced earlier, the Unplanned, during the movie at one point, one of the patients has a perforated uterus and she starts to bleed. And that certainly is a complication that, you know, they had a doctor, they didn't call an ambulance in the movie, you know, he stitched her up, and, you know, it was not good, because it was clear the clinic wanted to hide the fact that the girl had a complication, you know, not just from the public, but, you know, in the movie, they didn't tell her dad, they didn't tell her, they just fixed her up. And there were, you know, at one point, someone wants to call an ambulance, and they don't call an ambulance because they're afraid of the public relations disaster that would go along with an ambulance being called to the abortion clinic. And so, you know, we should have more requirements on the care of women.
And not less.
Not fewer requirements. In general, you know, if something bad happens, the woman should be required to be told.
Absolutely.
You know, you should, if your uterus is perforated during an operation, the doctor should tell you.
You need to know.
You know, if only so that later on, when you go home, if you don't feel good, you can say, okay, this could be a real problem. And go seek medical care. Go to the emergency room, rather than saying, oh, I'm probably just a little uncomfortable. You know, that's how you have, you know, women have much worse complications down the line.
Absolutely. Yes, and what are some of the dangers associated with not using a hospital while having an abortion over 24 weeks? I think you touched on this earlier.
Yeah, so if there's any kind of complication and you're in a clinic, and, you know, life-saving, you know, emergency room care could be far away, as opposed to if you're at a hospital, Well, chances are it's got an emergency room. Chances are, the corridors are wide enough to, wheel you into a place that they can have, the best medical care in the country. That's theoretically what everybody wants by, going to our great hospitals here in Massachusetts, to instead say, oh, you're going to have this at a clinic, out in the, far away from a hospital.
Right.
Why not have it at the hospital?
Because
it's and the reason that they're moving it out of a hospital is not to make it more convenient for the woman. It's to make it cheaper. It's to make it less expensive for them, so they make more money. Right.
We have to think about that, and I think that as you continue to talk about the profit that they're making, that people understand that it's not about you women. It's not about anything to do with you. It's about what they can make and how they can make money. Right. Your baby parts are being sold to all kinds of different people so that they can experiment on your child. And so I feel like we have to recognize that this has to stop. It really does. It really has to stop, and we need to choose life and make sure that we understand life is very, very important. Well, I'm going to, you did talk about your, because I was going to say, what are some of the campaigns that Renu Mass is currently working on? But we'll come back to that in a minute, because this YouTube clip that I want to show you, that people in high governmental places make choices to kill babies and get the people in society to agree with it voluntarily or involuntarily. So can we go to the YouTube clip, and we're going to see it for about maybe 5 minutes.
Reached adulthood, they are married to one another.
There is a shortage of millions of women in the world's most populous country. 135 boys are born for every 100 girls in some provinces in China. This is the result of an experiment that started decades ago on the other side of the world. In the USA, after World War II, it was the era of the economic miracle. People in the West were doing better than ever before, if not for the fear that their prosperity could soon come to an end. A big concern was constantly growing populations due to medical advances, especially in developing countries. Affluent Americans started a new movement. Together, they wanted to curb the large numbers of children worldwide. Most of them were men, from well-known scientists to the super-rich, like John D. Rockefeller III. They were people with influence and connections to the highest levels of the American government. Their foundations still continue to exist today. The Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Population Council. They triggered a rising tide of fear of a population explosion that soon also spread to other countries, and they formed the head of worldwide measures taken to decimate the population of the impoverished. This has been examined by Matthew Connolly, a historian at Columbia University in New York. He has researched in detail the development of this movement, from its beginnings to its impact today.
Population Council saw its mandate not just to control the rate of population growth, but also to address problems in the quality of population. So they had an explicit mandate to try to do something about the growth of the fertility rates among people who they thought would eventually take over the world if something wasn't done to reduce fertility rates across the board, but especially among people who they thought would be poor parents and would have even more poor children.
This way of thinking also took hold in American politics in 1966. US President Lyndon B. Johnson attached conditions for receiving development aid, one of them being that recipient countries must reduce their population. It was a time of drought and starvation in India. The president spoke on the phone with his Secretary of Agriculture.
then you just put down this morning instructions to all your people that the president says any future allotments, he wants to know what we give, and Exhibit A, he wants to know what we get. So let's evaluate that too. And I know the first sentence will be, we feed a lot of hungry children. I know that, so I don't need to be told. But just tell me what else we get out of it. Usually we just get kicked in the pants. That's what she does to us.
He stopped food deliveries until Indian President Indira Gandhi bowed to the demands. Accusations were made that the West had imperialistic intentions with its population control projects. A Department for Population Control was founded at the United Nations in 1969, the UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund. Through this ostensibly neutral path, Western governments channeled millions into population control in developing countries. The major donors, besides the United States, were Sweden, Great Britain, Germany, and Switzerland. South Korea was among the earliest testing grounds for population control. The country was devastated after the Korean War. At the same time, there was a baby boom with the highest birth rates in the world. The United States participated in the reconstruction from the very beginning. Population control was high on the agenda. These 4 Korean women grew up in a village 200 kilometers from Seoul and still remember the war and the time that followed.
The government said we should have fewer children. That's why we stuck to it. We women had abortions. We thought we were doing the right thing, and we did it voluntarily.
Western countries donated buses and jeeps that were converted into mobile medical units. Documents show that their task was not health promotion. The Population Council, an American foundation, expressed a clear-cut mission to the Korean Ministry of Health.
These vehicles are given to help improve living standards in Korea through a vigorous attack on the problem of excessive population growth.
Hi, welcome back to the Petra Destinee program. And we're just looking at this clip, and it was so sad because, and again, let me tell you the name of that clip. It's called A Lack of Women in Asia, DW documentary. Please watch that out because it's a very, very important clip. It tells you how the power structures that be, how they are playing games with our lives, you know? Yeah. And it's so sad. And you know, you watch Lyndon B. Johnson, he's sitting there and he's like, well, I'm not going to do anything for you if you don't get rid of your children. You know, and they thought that was going to be, and we in America did not have abortions yet. Okay, at that point we weren't having abortions, but they were trying to control abortion, you know, children all across the country, different countries, right, because they were afraid. So I mean, I just was kind of
sad.
I felt
So
really,
sad.
really bad because now it's just showing me what they're doing now.
Right.
It's just, you know, it's a macrocosm to a microcosm because it's right here in our backyard now. It's roosting here, and it is about population control. It is about profit. It is about all these other things that they're trying to do. They're wiping out people. They're wiping out generations. They're wiping out blacks, Hispanics, but with black people are the most people who get abortions. We see that in all the studies, that we are the ones that get more abortions than any other race.
Oh, and
Okay.
they want to hide that. One of the provisions of this Renu Act is they want to do away with the keeping of statistics about who gets an abortion, what age what stage the
race.
pregnancy is, or what race, you know, to basically be able to stop publicizing all of that. Because the more light you shed on that, the more people realize that it's about profit and exploitation
And genocide.
And so, well, let's stop collecting the statistics.
Wow.
Right now, the Department of Public Health here in Massachusetts collects statistics on abortions, just like they collect statistics on everything.
Absolutely.
Right, but all of a sudden, we would not be
So
keeping
with
an
this
eye on.
bill,
Takes out the requirement to collect those statistics.
that's ridiculous.
Yep.
That is absolutely ridiculous. So that's another reason why we need to stand up against this bill and
Yes.
let them know you cannot stop letting us know what you're doing behind closed doors, because there's something so foul about this whole process, you know, and then to just know that they are trying to do away with a certain population of people. Because as you see, they said, oh, well, you know, and if you went on further in the in that video, it was talking about how they knew that these women wanted to have a boy and that they would be
Yes.
heirs. And then what they started doing is now seeing, oh, well, we can abort, if it's a girl, we can abort it quickly.
girls,
So
right.
now you can just have your boy that you're looking for. So now their country is now heavily male.
Skewed, very skewed, yeah, and it's causing all kinds of additional problems, having so many more men
Than
than
women.
women.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, another statistic that we wouldn't be able to tell. You know, we could have an epidemic of sex selection abortion here and never
Yes,
know.
absolutely.
Until we started to see the, you know, the results
The
later on.
The effects, yeah. Wow.
But that they keep statistics on it now, and they wouldn't keep statistics on it if this legislation were to pass.
So again, Chanel, I thank you so much, because I think that there was so much information that we have to offer, and that our people need to get more aware of, you know, people are doing things, but they're doing things and they're saying that you're doing it. So it says, well, you know, the thing they say is pro-choice, and it's like, pro-choice, yeah, it's my choice. I can do what I want to with my body. It's my body, you know? And so they don't know that there's a bigger picture behind that little picture that you think that you are doing it because you want to do it. But actually, you're doing it because somebody else wants you to do it, but you just don't understand. And
Right.
so that
People are being exploited, yeah.
exploitation, you know, and again, I said voluntary or involuntarily, but there's going to be a time when it's going to be involuntary.
Yep, like
you
in
know?
China, yeah.
Oh yeah, like in let me see, other places, you know.
Yeah, China,
it becomes, I think Russia did it too. Russia was trying to do that at one point. Then they had to try to mate these people and let them have babies again. You know.
Yeah, it's all going in cycles.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's so sad. But again, this was thank you so much for coming on this the Petra Destinee program. I am so happy
Thank
to
you for
have you
having me.
here. And again, if you want to say a few things about
would-
your mass.
Yeah, well, I would again urge anybody in your audience to sign the petition at www.saynotoroe.com. It's www.saynotoroe, it's ROE.com, and you can sign the petition and get involved through that. So I thank you so much for the time here today.